I never expected my evening to go the way it did. The plan was simple: a quiet Friday night, a little time to relax, and hopefully, a date with someone I'd met recently on a dating app. I wasn't expecting fireworks or love at first sight, just a chill night to unwind. After a long week at work, I could use some company, someone to share a drink with, and maybe watch a movie. No strings attached, nothing complicated, just a good time. Her name was Chloe, and she seemed like a perfect match, a little sarcastic, easygoing, and not too clingy. We'd exchanged a few texts, and everything was going smoothly. By 7:30 p.m., I was cleaning up my apartment, making sure everything looked halfway decent. I cracked open a beer and tossed the empty pizza boxes into the trash, trying to look like I had my life together. I wasn't trying to impress her, but it didn't hurt to make things a little less messy. We agreed to meet around 8:30, and by 8:15, I was already feeling that excitement. Maybe it was the anticipation of a date. Maybe it was the thought of spending a night with someone new. I wasn't exactly looking for anything serious, but after a long work week, I could use some fun, a little distraction. 8:30 came and went. No text from Chloe. I shrugged it off, figuring she was running a little late, or maybe traffic was bad. It happened. I grabbed my phone to send a quick message, just to check in, when the doorbell rang. I jumped up, eager to see her, but when I opened the door, it wasn't Chloe standing there. Instead, I was met with an unexpected sight. Tom's mom, Susan, standing on my doorstep, holding a bottle of wine and smiling warmly. "Hey, Ryan," she greeted me, her tone cheerful. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I was just in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd drop by and say hi." I froze. Susan, Tom's mom. Why was she at my door? I stood there for a moment, blinking in disbelief, trying to process what was happening. The evening I had planned, the one that had been so simple, was already spiraling into chaos. Hey, Susan," I stammered, trying to pull myself together. "This is unexpected." She chuckled lightly, stepping inside like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, don't worry about it. I just thought I'd come by for a bit. Tom mentioned you were home, and I haven't seen you in a while. Plus, I brought wine." I wasn't sure how to respond. I had to clear my throat before speaking again. I wasn't expecting company tonight. Actually, I was waiting for someone." Susan didn't seem to notice my discomfort. She stepped into my apartment, looking around with an appreciative glance. "Oh, don't worry, I won't stay long. Just wanted to catch up. It's been ages since we had a proper chat." I stood there in stunned silence. I had absolutely no idea what to do. I had been preparing for a low-key evening with Chloe, but now I was suddenly caught in a situation where I had no control. Susan was standing in my living room, acting like everything was perfectly normal, while my mind was still trying to comprehend why on earth she was here. "So, what's been going on with you, Ryan?" Susan asked, settling herself on the couch. "Tom says you're working a lot these days. You need to take a break. You work too hard, you know." I didn't know how to answer her. My mind was racing, but all I could manage was a forced smile. "Yeah, it's been a busy week." Susan smiled, clearly enjoying the wine and the relaxed atmosphere. Meanwhile, my thoughts were a whirlwind. Chloe hadn't shown up, and now I was stuck here with Susan, my best friend's mom, trying to make small talk like everything was perfectly fine. I glanced at my phone, wondering if Chloe was still planning to come over, but before I could check, Susan spoke again. "You know, Ryan, I've always thought you and I would get along better if we had more time to talk. You're so much like Tom, but in some ways, you're different, in a good way." I blinked, not sure if I had heard her correctly. Thanks," I muttered, trying to figure out how to handle the conversation. Susan took another sip of her wine, completely unaware of how uncomfortable I felt. And then, with a little more warmth in her voice, she added, "You're a good guy, Ryan. You've got your life together. You deserve to enjoy it more." I just nodded, feeling the awkwardness growing by the second. This was not the night I had planned, and I had no idea where it was heading. Susan continued to sip her wine, completely at ease, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep my cool, though everything in me screamed to just shut the door and pretend this never happened. But there she was, sitting in my living room, smiling at me like we were old friends, while my mind raced, trying to figure out how to handle this situation. "So," she said, setting her glass down and looking at me with that familiar smile, "how's life treating you, Ryan? I know it's been a while since we've had a real conversation." I cleared my throat, still feeling like I was in the middle of some weird dream. It's been good. Just the usual, you know. Work, keeping busy, trying to find time for myself." Susan nodded, her eyes sparkling. "You really need to take it easy, you know. I see how hard you work, Tom always says you're the one who's keeping him grounded, but you're allowed to have a little fun too. I smiled nervously, not really sure where this conversation was going. I do try. It's been a lot lately. She leaned forward, placing her wine glass on the coffee table. You work so hard, Ryan, but you deserve someone who can keep up with you. Someone who challenges you, makes you smile. She paused, her eyes locking with mine in a way that sent an odd chill down my spine. I've always thought you were a catch. I blinked, unsure how to react. Was this really happening? Was Susan, my best friend's mom, flirting with me? My head spun, trying to make sense of it all. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know about that, I stammered, trying to brush it off. I'm just, doing my thing. She chuckled softly, but there was something different in her voice this time, something heavier. It's hard to believe that you're still flying solo, Ryan. You're good-looking, smart, and successful. You deserve someone who can keep up with you, not someone who holds you back. I felt like the room was closing in on me. My heart pounded, and I could feel the blood rushing to my face. Was she really saying what I thought she was saying? I wasn't sure how to respond. So I did what I always did when I was in uncomfortable situations. I made a joke. Well, I guess I haven't found that person yet, I said, forcing a smile. But I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. Susan raised an eyebrow, as if something I said had caught her attention. Ryan, sometimes you don't need to look too far. Sometimes the right person is right in front of you, and you just don't realize it. Her words hung in the air, making the atmosphere feel even more suffocating. I was trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying, but my thoughts were a jumbled mess. This wasn't supposed to be happening. She wasn't supposed to be acting this way. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the tense silence. I pulled it out and saw a text from Chloe. Hey, Ryan, I'm so sorry. Something came up, and I won't be able to make it tonight. Let's reschedule. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a fresh wave of confusion. Chloe wasn't coming? The girl I had planned the entire night for was bailing, while Susan was sitting across from me, making these strange comments. I couldn't believe it. I looked at Susan, who was still watching me, her eyes glinting with some unspoken meaning. It hit me then. Maybe she wasn't just being friendly. Maybe she had been waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to make the move. So, no Chloe tonight? Susan asked, her voice almost too sweet. What a shame. I'm sure she would have been great company. I glanced at her, still unsure of what was going on. Yeah, seems like she's not able to make it after all, I muttered, feeling the awkwardness growing by the second. Susan smiled, her expression softening. Well, then it looks like it's just you and me tonight. The way she said it sent another chill down my spine. I didn't know what to make of this. She wasn't just here to chat or share a glass of wine. There was something else happening, something that was starting to feel too real. I stood up, trying to create some distance between us. I think I need some air, I said, my voice shaky. I'll be right back. But as I moved to step outside, Susan's voice stopped me. Ryan, she called, her tone almost too soft, too inviting. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm just here to talk. But if you'd rather not, I understand. I turned around, my breath caught in my throat. It's not that. I just need a minute. She nodded, giving me a knowing smile. Take your time, Ryan. I'm not going anywhere. I stepped outside, the cool evening air a welcome relief, but my mind was still racing. What had just happened? And what on earth was Susan trying to do? I stood outside, leaning against the railing of the balcony, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. My heart was still pounding in my chest. Susan's words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just crossed some invisible line. This wasn't just an innocent chat. It was something more, something I wasn't prepared for. The cool air did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. What was going on? Was I overthinking everything? Susan was just Tom's mom, a woman I had known for years. She wasn't supposed to be making me feel like this, but everything about tonight felt wrong. There was something in the way she spoke to me, the way she looked at me, that made me feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, half expecting a message from Chloe, explaining her sudden change of plans. But there was nothing. My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, but none of them made sense. Was she just trying to avoid the awkwardness? Or was something else going on that I hadn't understood? I took a deep breath and glanced back through the sliding glass door into the apartment. Susan was still inside, sitting on the couch, the wine glass in her hand, looking at the door like she was waiting for me to come back in. I couldn't decide if I should go back inside, if I should just face her and see where this weird conversation would lead, or if I should just leave altogether. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not with everything unresolved. I finally made my way back into the apartment, my heart still racing. Susan looked up at me as I stepped back inside, her expression neutral but knowing. She didn't say anything at first, just sipped her wine, as though she were trying to decide whether or not to speak. "Feeling better?" she asked softly, her eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah," I replied, my voice shaky. "Just needed a second." She smiled, a small, understanding smile. "I get it. Sometimes, things can feel a little overwhelming, especially when they're unexpected." I tried to smile back, but it felt forced. The awkwardness hung between us like a heavy cloud. I didn't know what to do next. I wanted to tell her to leave, to explain that I wasn't comfortable with what was happening, but at the same time, I didn't want to be rude. She was Tom's mom, after all, and I didn't want to make things worse. "I didn't expect tonight to go like this," I said, trying to break the tension. "I thought Chloe was coming over, but things just didn't work out, I guess." Susan nodded slowly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "I'm sorry to hear that, but sometimes things don't go according to plan, and that's okay." I wanted to leave, to change the subject, to do anything to get out of the weird moment we were trapped in, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when everything felt so off. "Well, I'm glad you stopped by," I said, my voice thick with uncertainty. "I guess it's been a while since we really talked." Susan's smile widened, and I could see a glint of something in her eyes. It was like she was waiting for me to say more, to open up, to be vulnerable. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way she was looking at me made me feel uneasy. "I always enjoy our conversations," she said, setting her wine glass down on the coffee table. "You've always been a good listener, Ryan, and I think you've got a lot to offer, not just to Tom, but to the people around you." I shifted in my seat, feeling the heat rising to my cheeks. This was getting too weird, too personal. I didn't want to talk about my life with Susan. I didn't want to open up to her. I just wanted her to leave and for everything to go back to normal. "Yeah, well," I said, clearing my throat. I try to keep to myself most of the time. I don't really have a lot of time for much else. Susan leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, her eyes fixed on mine. "That's the thing, Ryan. You're so focused on what you're doing, but sometimes you forget about the people who matter, people who could be there for you, people who could make your life easier. You're not meant to do everything on your own, you know." Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. Was she talking about herself? Was she implying that she could be the person who could make my life easier? The thought made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't bring myself to call her out on it. I just wanted to get through the evening without making things worse. "Look, Susan, I appreciate you stopping by," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "but I think I just need to be alone for a bit." Susan's smile faded slightly, but she nodded, standing up from the couch. "I understand. I'll head out soon, but just remember, Ryan, you don't have to do everything alone." Her words lingered in my mind as she walked toward the door. I wasn't sure if she was talking about me or something else, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me when she finally left. The door closed behind her, and I was left standing in the silence, unsure of what had just happened. The moment Susan left, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. It was like the tension in the room had finally been released, and I could breathe again. But as the door clicked shut behind her, a strange feeling lingered in the air, like the remnants of a conversation I wasn't sure how to interpret. I didn't know what to make of Susan's words, the way she looked at me, or the way everything seemed to shift in a matter of minutes. I walked over to the couch and flopped down, my mind still racing. What had just happened? Was I imagining things? Or had Susan actually been flirting with me? I shook my head, trying to shake the thought. It couldn't have been that. She was just being friendly, right? Maybe I was just overthinking it. I picked up my phone, hoping to find some sense of normalcy. I'd been waiting for Chloe's message all night, and now that the chaos had settled, I checked to see if she had replied to my last text. Nothing. Not a word. It was almost like she'd vanished off the face of the earth. I leaned back, rubbing my forehead, feeling the frustration building. What was going on? Chloe had seemed so into the idea of hanging out, and now she was nowhere to be found. Susan had come over unannounced, turned the evening upside down, and now Chloe wasn't even showing up. My plans had completely fallen apart. I thought about texting Chloe again, asking if everything was okay, but I hesitated. I didn't want to seem too eager or desperate. I already felt like I had enough to deal with. Susan's visit was one thing, but now Chloe's silence was another. The uncertainty was starting to eat at me. The doorbell rang again, and I nearly jumped out of my seat. Who else could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone else tonight. I stood up slowly, making my way to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Maybe it was Chloe, finally showing up, ready to explain why she had been late. But when I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing there was Tom, my best friend. He looked slightly surprised to see me, but his expression quickly turned into a smile. "Hey, man," Tom greeted me casually. "I was just in the area and figured I'd stop by. You doing okay?" I blinked at him, still trying to process the night's events. Yeah, I'm fine. Just been a weird night. Tom stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, like he always did. He gave the apartment a quick glance before his eyes landed on me. Weird how? Everything all right? I hesitated, unsure of what to say. What could I tell him? That his mom had shown up uninvited and made everything uncomfortable? That I felt like I had just been the recipient of some odd, unspoken tension? I couldn't tell him that. He was my best friend, but this was one of those situations that wasn't exactly easy to explain. I don't know, man, I finally said, running a hand through my hair. It's just been strange. I was expecting someone to come over, and then your mom showed up. And, well, things got a little weird. Tom raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. My mom? What do you mean, weird? I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. It's hard to explain. She just showed up out of nowhere, and we talked for a while, but it wasn't like the normal conversations we've had. It felt like there was some kind of, I don't know, tension? Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but it was definitely strange. Tom looked at me, his face slowly breaking into a grin. Wait, you're telling me my mom came over and made it awkward? That's rich. I thought you two got along just fine. We do, I said, frustrated. But this was different. She was acting different. I don't even know how to describe it. She was saying things that made me feel weird, like she was, I don't know, trying to get closer? But I don't think she meant it that way. Tom's grin faded as he studied me more carefully. You're saying she flirted with you? That's kind of messed up. I winced at the words. I don't know if I'd call it flirting, but yeah, it felt like that. It was just off. Tom shook his head slowly. Man, that's not good. If my mom's crossing lines like that, you need to talk to her. Seriously. I rubbed my temples, trying to process the situation. I don't know, Tom. It just didn't feel right. She's my best friend's mom. I can't just call her out on something like that. Tom nodded, his expression now serious. You're right, but you need to set boundaries. Otherwise, things are only going to get weirder. Trust me on that. I leaned against the wall, feeling like the room was closing in on me. The night had started off so simple. I was just looking for some company, a casual night to unwind, and now it felt like everything had spiraled out of control. First, Susan had shown up, then Chloe bailed, and now I was dealing with this weird tension. It was too much to handle all at once. I'm just trying to figure it out, man, I said, sighing. I don't know what to do. Tom patted me on the back, offering his usual support. We'll figure it out, but you need to talk to your mom. If it makes you uncomfortable, don't ignore it. Yeah, you're right, I said quietly. Thanks, man. And as I stood there with my best friend, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to get even more complicated. The night had spiraled out of control, and I felt like I was trapped in a situation I couldn't escape. Tom's sudden appearance had caught me off guard, and the tension with Susan still lingered in the air, like a cloud that wouldn't lift. After talking to Tom for a few minutes, I knew that things were only going to get more complicated from here on out. But what could I do? It wasn't like I could just walk away from my own life and ignore what was happening. Tom was still sitting on the couch, sipping the beer I handed him. He'd been looking at me with a mixture of concern and confusion, probably wondering why I hadn't come clean about what had really happened with his mom. I could tell he wanted to say something more, but he was holding back. I knew I had to explain myself, but at the same time, I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive into a conversation like this. What if I made things worse? So, are you going to tell me what's really going on? Tom asked, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but I could hear the curiosity in his tone. You've been acting weird all night. I hesitated, not sure how to approach the subject. Tom was my best friend, but this was his mother we were talking about. I didn't want to betray any trust, but at the same time, I didn't want to pretend nothing had happened. There was too much at stake. She came over unannounced, I started, unsure how to frame it. I was expecting someone else, but she just showed up, and we ended up talking. But it was more than just a conversation. She said some things that made me uncomfortable, Tom, and I'm not sure what to make of it. Tom's brow furrowed. What kind of things? What are you saying, man? I rubbed my face, trying to find the right words. It wasn't anything direct, but she was acting kind of flirty. I don't know if she meant to, but the way she was talking to me felt off. It was like she was trying to get closer, and I didn't know how to handle it. Tom's expression shifted to one of disbelief. Wait, my mom? Flirty? You've got to be kidding me. I'm serious, Tom, I said, my voice low. She kept saying stuff like I was a good guy, that I deserved someone who could challenge me, that I was a catch. And I get it. She's just being friendly. But there was something else there. Something more. I don't know. Personal. Tom looked like he was about to say something, but he stopped himself, clearly processing what I was saying. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. I don't know what to say to that. I've known my mom for years, man. She's always been different. but I never thought she'd cross those kinds of lines. I stood there, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. I didn't know how to handle it, Tom. She was talking like she was trying to get closer to me, and I didn't want to make it worse. But now I'm left wondering if I should have said something. Tom exhaled again, clearly trying to process what I was saying. You're right to be uncomfortable, Ryan. I get it, but this is my mom we're talking about. She's not like that, or at least, I've never thought of her that way. But if she's crossing boundaries, then you need to set them. You've got to talk to her. I looked at him, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I don't want to cause any more problems, man. I don't want to make this awkward between us. Tom gave me a pointed look. If she's making you feel uncomfortable, you have to say something. You don't have to make it a big deal, but you can't just let it slide. I don't want you to feel trapped in this, man. You're my best friend. I nodded, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. I had to confront Susan. I had to find a way to put an end to whatever was happening before it spiraled any further. After a few moments of silence, I glanced at the clock. It was late, and I had no idea if Susan was still around, but I had to deal with this. I couldn't let it fester. I'll talk to her tomorrow, I said, my voice steady. I don't want to make things worse, but I can't keep pretending like nothing happened. Tom gave me an encouraging nod. Good. And if you need anything, man, you know I'm here for you. We'll get through this. I gave him a small smile, grateful for his support. But as I sat back down on the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even more complicated. I had no idea how Susan was going to react, or if she even realized what she had done. But I knew I had to face her for my own peace of mind. I just hoped I could handle whatever came next. The next day was no easier than the night before. I had barely slept. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Susan over and over, trying to make sense of everything. Was I reading too much into it? Was I just uncomfortable because of the unexpectedness of the situation? Or had she really been flirting with me? I had tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Susan had crossed a line, and I needed to address it. I had no idea how to approach her about it, though. It was Tom's mom, for crying out loud. What was I supposed to say? I spent most of the morning trying to distract myself. I went for a run, hoping the fresh air would clear my head, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't used to confronting people about stuff like this. I wasn't even sure how Susan would react, but I knew I couldn't just ignore it. Around noon, I finally mustered the courage to call her. I stared at her number on my phone for a few seconds before hitting the call button. My heart pounded in my chest as the phone rang. When she picked up, her voice sounded cheerful, like nothing had changed. Hey Ryan, how's it going? I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey Susan. No, it's fine. I just wanted to talk to you about last night. There was a brief silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her mentally brace herself. Sure, of course. What's on your mind? I tried to find the right words, but they didn't come easily. Look, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I want to be honest with you. The way you were talking last night, it made me uncomfortable. There was another pause, this one longer than the last. Uncomfortable. Ryan, I'm sorry if I said something that made you feel that way. That wasn't my intention at all. I could tell she was trying to sound calm, but her voice was just a little too sweet, like she was hiding something. I know, but it wasn't just about what you said. It's just the way you said it. It felt like you were crossing some boundaries, and I didn't know how to respond. There was another long silence, and I could almost hear her thinking. Ryan, she finally said, her voice softer. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. I guess I've been a little forward, but I care about you, and sometimes I get a little carried away. I felt my stomach drop. What was she saying? She cared about me? Was she implying something more? I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything about the conversation was starting to make me feel uneasy again. I just think we need to set some boundaries, I said, trying to sound firm. I don't want to make this weird, Susan, but I need to make sure we're on the same page. This can't keep happening. There was a pause, and then she responded, her voice tinged with regret. I understand. You're right. I let things get a little out of hand. I'm sorry, Ryan. I truly didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it didn't last. This was far from over. Thank you for understanding, I said quietly, my voice a little shaky. I just wanted to be honest with you. I hope we can keep things normal between us. I don't want things to change. Susan's tone shifted slightly, and I could tell she was being more genuine now. Of course, Ryan. I understand. And I promise, I won't do anything like that again. I never meant to put you in a position where you felt uncomfortable. The conversation ended shortly after that. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. Part of me was glad that I had spoken up and set boundaries, but another part of me was still haunted by the way Susan had acted. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time I'd be dealing with the fallout from this conversation. Later that afternoon, I went out for a walk, trying to clear my head. I didn't know what would happen next, but I had made my decision. I had spoken my truth to Susan, and now it was up to her to respect those boundaries. But deep down, I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. There was more to this situation than I could see, and I wasn't sure I was prepared for whatever came next. As I walked, I thought about Tom. What would he think if he found out? How would he react? I didn't want to ruin my friendship with him, but this wasn't something I could just ignore. I had no answers, but I did know one thing. This night, this conversation with Susan was only the start of something much bigger than I had anticipated. The next few days felt like I was walking on eggshells. After talking to Susan, part of me felt relieved, like a weight had been lifted. I had said what needed to be said, and I was hoping that she'd respect my boundaries. But at the same time, something gnawed at me, something I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about the way Susan had looked at me, the way her voice softened when she spoke. It wasn't just a motherly tone anymore. It felt like she was searching for something more, something I wasn't ready to confront. I had done the right thing by setting boundaries, but I still wasn't sure how this was going to affect my relationship with her. And what about Tom? How could I even bring this up to him without destroying our friendship? I had no idea how to proceed, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending like everything was normal. I spent the next few days focusing on work, keeping myself busy to avoid overthinking everything. But every time I saw a text from Susan or Tom, a knot formed in my stomach. I couldn't escape the tension. I needed to talk to Tom, but I didn't want to betray his trust. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting or making something out of nothing. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about his mom and the boundaries I had tried to set. By Thursday evening, I decided to call Tom. I couldn't keep putting this off. I needed to talk to him, to let him know what had happened, even if it was uncomfortable. When he picked up, I could hear the background noise of a bar or restaurant. "Hey, man," Tom greeted me, his voice upbeat. "What's up?" I hesitated for a moment. "Hey, Tom, I need to talk to you about something. It's kind of personal." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him sit up straighter. "Yeah, of course. What's going on?" I let out a deep breath. "It's about your mom." Tom was quiet for a second, his tone shifting. "What about her? Is everything okay?" I bit my lip, trying to find the right words. "I'm not sure. Look, I need to be honest with you. I know this is going to be awkward, but I don't know how else to say it. Your mom, she came over to my place the other night, unannounced, and things got a little weird." Tom's voice became more serious. "What do you mean, weird?" I swallowed hard. This wasn't easy, but I had to do it. "She said some things, Tom." She was acting kind of flirtatious. I didn't know how to handle it. I tried to brush it off, but it was uncomfortable, and I had to say something. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel my heart racing. I had no idea how Tom was going to react. This wasn't just an awkward situation for me. It was something that could impact our entire friendship. Finally, Tom spoke. His voice was tight, controlled. "What kind of things? What exactly did she say?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It wasn't anything direct, but she was saying stuff like I'm a catch, and that I deserved someone who could challenge me. She was saying things that felt personal. You know? It was like she was crossing a line, and I didn't know how to respond. Tom let out a frustrated sigh. "Man, I had no idea she was doing that. That's not cool. She's always been a little overbearing, but I never thought she'd make you feel uncomfortable like that." I didn't know how to handle it, I admitted. I had to set some boundaries, and I talked to her about it, but I'm still not sure how to move forward. I don't want to cause any problems, but I had to tell you. There was a long pause before Tom spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I appreciate you telling me, Ryan. I really do. And I'm sorry that happened. My mom can be unpredictable. I'll talk to her, make sure she understands. This shouldn't be happening, and I don't want it to cause any issues between us." I felt a little relief, but it didn't entirely erase the weight that had settled in my chest. "I just didn't want to keep it from you, man. I don't want things to get weird between us." Tom let out a short laugh. "It's not going to get weird, I promise. I'm glad you told me. I'll handle it from here." I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it." After we hung up, I felt a little lighter, but the discomfort still lingered. I had done the right thing by telling Tom, but I knew this was far from over. Susan might have agreed to respect my boundaries, but how would she act moving forward? Would she try to ignore what had happened, or would she test the waters again? I couldn't be sure. I sat in silence for a while, trying to process everything. The conversation with Tom had been helpful, but I knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger situation. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I had to prepare myself for whatever came my way. At least now, I had Tom's support, and that made all the difference. The next few days dragged on, the weight of the conversation with Tom still lingering in my mind. I felt relieved, yes, but also unsure. Tom had promised to talk to his mom, and I trusted him, but part of me couldn't help but wonder if it would make a difference. I didn't want to be dramatic about it, but it was hard not to feel shaken by what had happened. Susan's behavior had caught me off guard, and even after talking to Tom, I still wasn't sure where things stood between us. I had tried to focus on work, burying myself in emails and meetings, but even then, the discomfort was hard to shake. The awkwardness had left a mark, and every time I thought about Susan, I felt a mix of confusion and frustration. I couldn't understand why she behaved that way. Was it something I had said? Something I'd done? Or had I just misinterpreted her intentions? But as the days passed, I forced myself to put it out of my mind. There wasn't much more I could do except wait and see how things unfolded. I didn't want to bring it up again with Tom unless I absolutely had to. The last thing I wanted was for our friendship to be affected by something like this. Then, late on a Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a message. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I saw it was from Susan, my heart skipped a beat. "Hi, Ryan. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out and apologize again for how I acted the other night. I really didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I've thought a lot about it, and I want you to know I respect your boundaries. I'm sorry if I crossed any lines." I stared at the message for a few moments, unsure of what to do. Part of me felt a sense of relief. She was acknowledging what had happened, taking responsibility, but the other part of me was still uneasy. Was this apology genuine, or was it just her trying to smooth things over? I took a deep breath and typed out a reply. "Thanks for reaching out, Susan. I appreciate your message. I just want to move forward with everything being clear between us. I hope we can keep things respectful." I hit send before I could overthink it. It was simple, straightforward, and to the point. I didn't need to drag this out, but I also didn't want to leave any room for confusion. The response came quicker than I expected. "Of course, Ryan. I understand. Let's keep things respectful and professional. Thanks for being understanding. I hope we can move past this." There was something in her tone that seemed more sincere, and I felt a weight lift off my chest. But as I sat back, the relief was short-lived. I still didn't know how things would be when I saw her next, or if the awkwardness would linger. The next day, I ran into Tom at lunch. As usual, he was sitting at our favorite spot, the little cafe near the office. When I sat down, he greeted me with a nod, looking a little more serious than usual. "Hey, man, how are you feeling after the talk with my mom?" he asked, his voice casual but his eyes searching mine. I shrugged, trying to keep things light. "Better, I guess." She apologized. "So we'll see how things go from here." Tom nodded slowly. "Good. I talked to her, just like I said I would. She's been a little off lately, you know? She's been acting differently around people." I looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean? Has something been going on with her?" Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I don't know. She's been a little more distant with me too. And I've noticed her acting a bit strange around other people. I think maybe she's been feeling lonely. But that's no excuse for what happened with you." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. It made sense, in a way. Susan was always so independent, but maybe there was something more going on beneath the surface that I hadn't seen. But it still didn't excuse her behavior, and I couldn't let it slide. "I get that, man," I said quietly, but I still had to set boundaries. "I just don't want it to get weird between us. I care about our friendship." "I know, and I respect that," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "I'm just glad you told me. And I think she gets it now. She really is sorry. You're a good guy, Ryan. You didn't deserve any of that." I felt a little better hearing Tom's words. At least he understood where I was coming from, and I knew he had my back. But even with his reassurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were still a little out of control. "I just want things to go back to normal," I said with a sigh. "I don't want any more weirdness." Tom gave me a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, man. We'll figure it out. Things will get back to normal soon." As I sat there with him, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done what I needed to do, and now all I could do was wait for things to settle. But even with the conversation behind me, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still off. What if Susan tried something again? What if things didn't go back to normal? I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. The days following my conversation with Tom felt strange. There was an odd sense of normalcy, but it was brittle, like something delicate that could shatter at any moment. I had done what I could to address the situation with Susan. I'd set boundaries, talked things through, and now I had to wait and see if everything would really go back to normal. But deep down, I wasn't sure if it ever could. I kept telling myself that I had made the right call. I didn't want to cause any drama, but I couldn't just let Susan's behavior slide. I wasn't about to let things get any weirder than they already had been. And yet, despite my best efforts to keep things calm, the tension lingered like an unresolved chord. It wasn't until the weekend that things took another unexpected turn. I had spent most of Saturday catching up on errands and spending some time with a few friends to take my mind off things. By the time evening rolled around, I was feeling pretty relaxed, even if I couldn't completely shake the strange feeling about Susan. I hadn't heard from her since our conversation, and that was a relief in one sense, but the silence also made me wonder if I'd handled things the right way. I was just about to call it a night when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Tom. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Hey, Ryan. I just talked to my mom. She's been asking about you. She wants to meet up. I think she's trying to make amends for the other night. What do you think?" I stared at the message, feeling a sense of dread creep over me. Why was Susan reaching out again? Hadn't I made it clear that I needed space? I didn't know how I felt about meeting up with her. On one hand, it seemed like a good opportunity to make sure things were completely cleared up. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure I was ready to face her again. I typed a quick response, my fingers hovering over the keys. "I don't know, man. I appreciate you letting me know, but I'm still not sure if it's a good idea." I stared at the message for a few moments, considering my next move. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to jump into something that might only make things more uncomfortable. I sighed and sent the message. It wasn't long before Tom replied. "I get it. I'll tell her you're not ready. Just wanted to check with you first. Let me know what you decide." I felt a little better knowing Tom respected my decision. But still, a part of me couldn't shake the thought that this situation with Susan wasn't over. It had only been a few days since our conversation, and I was already feeling like I was stuck in this weird cycle. I tossed my phone aside and sank into the couch, trying to distract myself by watching TV. I wanted to forget about Susan and everything that had happened, but the thought kept creeping back into my mind. An hour later, I was about to head to bed when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Susan. I froze. "Hey, Ryan. I know things have been strange between us, but I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry for making you uncomfortable. I never meant to cross any lines. If you ever wanted to talk or clear the air, I'm here. Take care." I stared at the message, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt like this was exactly what I needed to hear. A sincere apology, an acknowledgement of the situation. But part of me also wondered if this was just another attempt to smooth things over, to make herself feel better without really addressing the underlying issues. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to reply, to finally end the awkwardness once and for all. But another part of me wanted to leave it alone, to let the dust settle and move on. As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced with thoughts of Susan, Tom, and everything that had happened. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Was it my fault? Had I done something to encourage Susan? Or had she simply misunderstood the situation? Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I fell asleep, but the questions still lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Something told me that even though Susan had apologized, there was more to the story. The next few days felt like I was walking on a tightrope. Every time my phone buzzed, I had to fight the urge to check it, wondering if it was a message from Susan or Tom. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was caught in some kind of limbo, not quite back to normal, but not completely falling apart either. Everything felt like it was in a holding pattern, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Susan had apologized. She had acknowledged what happened, and while I still wasn't completely sure about her motives, there was a small part of me that wanted to believe she genuinely wanted to make amends. That night, as I sat at home, I decided to take the plunge. I'd been avoiding her message for too long, and I knew that if I didn't reply soon, I'd be stuck in this uncomfortable space forever. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and started typing. "Hi, Susan. I appreciate your message. I think it's best that we clear the air. We both said some things that made things awkward, but I'd like to move forward. I hope we can keep things respectful moving forward. Take care." I read the message over and over, unsure if it was too direct or if I was being too passive, but I sent it, and within minutes, I saw the read, receipt. I held my breath, waiting for her reply. When the message came, I almost didn't want to open it, but I did anyway. "Thank you for being so understanding, Ryan. I really do want to respect your boundaries. I think we both got a little lost in the moment, and I never meant to make you feel uncomfortable. Let's move forward and leave this behind us." I let out a sigh of relief. Her response was calm, sincere even. It was exactly what I had hoped for. I felt the weight on my chest lift just a little bit, but I knew the road to normalcy wasn't going to be easy. We'd both been through something weird, and there was no going back to the way things were before. but at least we had addressed it. I put my phone down, but I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that things weren't entirely over. What if Susan wasn't being fully honest with me? What if she was just pretending to move on, all the while nursing some unspoken feelings? I wasn't sure, but I had to take her at face value. The last thing I wanted to do was overthink this. That night, I tried to unwind. I called a few friends to catch up, but even when I was laughing and talking about nothing, my mind kept wandering back to the weirdness of the past week. There was just too much that had happened, too many feelings left unaddressed, too many unanswered questions. When I went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about Susan and me anymore. This situation was so much more complicated than I had initially realized. Tom was my best friend. He was like a brother to me, and I wasn't sure what the fallout from this situation would be. Could our friendship withstand this awkwardness? Could I continue seeing Susan, knowing everything that had transpired? As I closed my eyes, I tried to push the thoughts from my mind, but it wasn't easy. I knew the next time I saw Tom, the conversation would inevitably come up. He'd want to know if everything was okay with his mom, and I'd have to tell him that we were fine, but that wouldn't be the whole truth. Things were fine for now, but I knew that we had to be honest with each other if we were ever going to move past this. I turned over in bed, trying to quiet my mind, but it was no use. The questions kept flooding in. What if Susan had meant more than she let on? What if this was just the beginning of something I couldn't control? For now, all I could do was take things one step at a time and hope that whatever came next would lead to something more manageable. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew that things were far from over. The next few weeks would be crucial. Whatever happened, I would have to be ready for it.